Man, this is such a trap, especially nowadays, the technological age we're living in, the internet. Everybody has their awakening story and, enlightenment story. It's another pursuit for the mind to be obsessed with chasing happiness in the future at some point that it's never going to reach. How are you going to reach a concept? So then we say, well, what is enlightenment then? What's this awakening? So then we use more concepts to try to explain the original concept. Just keep getting lost in concepts. So somebody might say, if you ask them what's enlightenment or what's awakening, they say, well, it's when you have a strong, peace, and when you have compassion. I say, okay, sounds good. By the way, enlightenment, it's pointing. All concepts, all words are pointers. It's pointing to something very beautiful. It's very nice. It's part of this creation game that we're playing. It's pointing to recognizing who we are beyond the level of creation, basically. So then they said, it's when you're peaceful and compassionate, that's enlightenment. So then I'll say, all right, because I want to understand this. I'll say like that. I'll say, you got to break it down to me though, for me. How much peace? What's the hertz of the peace? What frequency of peace? Because look, I feel peace. You ask the average person, everything's subjective. Just real quick, I was at the sauna some years ago, and there's a guy there, and I'd seen him around town. Every time I see him talking to somebody, he'd throw this line out. I'm so blissed out, man. I'm blissed out all the time. He'd say it every time. And so then he goes to the sauna, and I'm like, damn it. Those are my least favorite people, right? The ones that are a legend, a spiritual legend in their own mind. The real authentic beings, you think they're going to talk like that? If anything, they're going to step themselves down. They don't want to you don't want to flash your piece. Hey, check my piece, man. No, it's the opposite. You want to just, humility becomes very tasty. So this guy is an example of how everybody has their own world and perception and mind about what peace is. If somebody else felt what this guy's saying, he's all blissed out, the other person feeling that would be like, if they entered into his astral body and experienced what he was, they'd be like, geez, man, this guy's restless as hell. I don't call that bliss. So that's why it's what are we talking about? To the person that says enlightenment and awakening is when you're peaceful and have compassion. Okay, how much peace? I just want to understand. How much peace? And then they might say, oh, you're being silly, man. Why? Because they're caught out, but they don't want to look at that. I'm like, no, you're being silly. I'm asking you to just explain what you're saying. That's all, because I want to understand. Yeah, this happens. Don't this happen a lot for some of you? Some conversations. It doesn't have to be spiritual, just anything. When you're trying to understand, you're authentically trying to understand somebody, and so when you ask them to explain, they get mad at you. Why? Because they don't understand their own self, what they're pretending to understand. The same thing. When you ask to define what is this enlightenment, and do it for your own self. If you have this idea, this abstract idea of what enlightenment is, okay, just define it for yourself. If you debunk that concept, that's the point here, you're going to be more chill, man. You'll be more enlightened even, whatever that is. Enlightenment's pointing. I already shared what it's pointing to. It's pointing to the realization of this formless source that's here, there, everywhere, while it's also in form. That's the thing. Or compassion, same thing. A lot of people like that word. It's compassion. Well, how compassionate do I got to be? What do you mean compassion? So if I'm with my family and the gunman takes them out, and then the gunman stops, it's like, did you like that? what am I supposed to say? Like, you know, like, how? And then the person will say, well, no, I'm not talking about that. Okay, well, what are you talking about? Oh, you're being silly. See, they'll do that again. No, you're being silly. What are you talking? How much compassion are we talking? What's the hertz and frequency of compassion, and how often? If I'm up for 18 hours a day, can I be compassionate? Like, do I got to be compassionate 17 hours, or about 12? All this are abstract ideas and concepts supporting the main concept that the mind likes, which is I'm chasing awakening and enlightenment. So that's why I felt I wanted to, debunk that. I remember, I won't say his name, there was a teacher though, some time ago. He's not alive anymore. And he got a lot of accusations, man, for, sexually abusing or molesting some of his students. And so there was a message board. Man, this is like 25 years ago. Because I was in LA and I was on my cheap computer looking at this message board. And I remember somebody was bringing that up because they were talking about him. And they're like, because this girl was just going crazy about how awake he was, how enlightened he was. And so some others were like, but did you see like his close disciples actually had pictures of them together? This is before they had the deep fake software now. That's scary stuff. So these disciples, they're like with him, and then they're sharing their testimony of how, like, what they did. And you know what the girl said? Not picking on girls, it could be guy, girl, it doesn't matter. The girl said, you don't understand. This guy was willing to put himself out there and catch a criminal charge if it meant helping these beings awaken. I had to do this tantric initiation with them. That was their karma. They had to get that. That was the only way they could be awake. And so somebody has to do it. That's what she said. What are you going to say to somebody like that? They're so locked in their own prison, their own perception. And see, some teachers like, when somebody just reveres, like, you're just like, oh my God. I remember I was listening to Muji some time ago, and I met a cool girl from Switzerland in another town. And I told her, we were talking to spiritual teacher. I said, I like Muji, I listen to him. She said, yeah, I can't listen to him. Why? Because when I saw him, this particular scene she saw, I can understand. She said, the people are just like, they're just all gaga, and she's like, it turned me off. So, it depends on who we're talking about. Everything's subjective. And then you can get in quibbles about who's more enlightened than the other person. That happens too. So, but I was saying about how powerful the devotional energy is. If the beings are worshiping you like so much, man, that is a huge trap. That's a huge trap for the teacher if they like that. And here's what I feel. Number one, I couldn't allow that. I just couldn't allow it. Some might be say, well, man, it ain't never gonna happen to you. Good. But let's pretend it did. I couldn't do it, man. There's something that's because I'm not helping you by allowing that. And so that's why I hypothesize, on some level at least, they must like it. The teachers must like, if they're getting that heavy dose of devotional energy, because it's super intoxicating, they must like it if they're not doing anything about it. I'm not saying smack them in the head and say, no, but I would be constantly pointing to, look, whatever you're enjoying in me, it is in you, it must be, otherwise you couldn't recognize it. You need to focus on that. It doesn't mean like you don't still give gratitude for the form that God's taking and expressing through to help you recognize your own God expression. No, it can be there. That's natural. You can't help it anyway. But when it crosses the line and gets too much, sticky, you start worshiping somebody like they are God. I guarantee Jesus wouldn't allow that. Wouldn't allowed it. Because it's just not natural. And it's disempowering for the people who are doing it. They have to recognize that like this power is in them. Real bhakti, it's a balance. It's a balance between, because if you have a strong devotional nature, it's not like you can just turn that off. You naturally revere God in form. But the point is to fuse. You fuse with this form, something surrenders into this form, and then you start to realize that you have the same qualities as this form. Actually, those same qualities are in that form. It's in you, it's in them, and everybody. But see, this is a karmic seed that hides. The reason a lot of people want to they don't want to look at that. They just want to just worship other people. Why? Avoiding responsibility. That's why. They don't want to look and own this God essence power that's inside them. They'd rather just like, no, you're God. Everything you're God. You see, it's a subtle tactic that one can use, the ego uses, to keep this separation going. And what I'm trying to say is a good teacher wouldn't allow that, because it's not serving the people. All right, I hope you got something from that. I'll see you.